Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. Thank you so much for being here. I have two special guests with me tonight, and it took us a while to schedule this because they are in Australia. And I have Julie and Mark Wallace with me here tonight, and they are the parents of Sara Wallace, who was killed in the London Bridge attacks in 2017. And they are also the founders of the SARZ Spirit Foundation that they will be talking about at some point during our interview today. So I want to welcome you both here. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for your kindness. I just need to let you know, Sara is Sara Zelenek. So Mark's been her father since she was 1, but her name is Sara Zelenek, my daughter. But I'm Julie Wallace and Mark Wallace. About that.
That's okay. And that's where SARS comes from. Okay, I got it. All right. So this is your story. And so I want you to talk about your daughter and bring her to life for us. Tell us a little bit about her and what happened to your daughter. And then we will get into your grief journey.
Sara was 21 and a half years old when she went over to London to become an au pair nanny. She had an older brother, Scott, who was 23 at the time, and a younger brother, Harrison, who was 16. So she decided to go on the trip of a lifetime. She planned it with her brother, Scott, who also did a similar trip around Europe and London at 21. I also did the whole European London trip as a 23-year-old. So we thought you need to see the world before you settle down into your career, before you have children, before you get into life and explore. You learn so much from travel. So she was super excited about this trip of a lifetime. She insisted I had a big 50th birthday party before I left, and I didn't really want to do it, but she said, no, Mum, you're old. You need to have a party. And then I'm going. So I had this amazing birthday party that she organised for me. And then she went off on this trip of a lifetime. She was meant to actually go to Milan. She was looking after a little 6-year-old boy there. And at the last minute, the nanny over there's grandmother died and she had to go back suddenly. So they ended up getting a local girl there to take her job. So she had just under 2 weeks and she said, oh my God, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? So I said, well, why don't you just try London? And she got a job there straight away in Victorian central London. She had a friend over there, just a 5-minute bus ride from her. And I thought, that's great. It's a safe place. London, English-speaking country. And I was really comfortable and happy with her going there instead of Milan. So she actually did have one night in Milan because she booked her tickets. So she went Milan overnight and then straight to London. And then she started work the next morning, drove the kids to school on the first day. And the au pair nanny mum was just so surprised that she could drive in London traffic and totally confident after her big trip, not jet lagged. But that was Sara. She had so much common sense. She was bright and funny and quirky. She was shy with people she didn't know, but really over the top, hilariously funny and boisterous with people she did. She smiled with her eyes. She was kind. She was supportive. She was genuine. She had more common sense than far more. She always looked after everyone, even at schoolies. She looked and protect people. We found out years later all the stories of friends who weren't coping mentally at school. She stuck up for them, supported them. And I didn't know any of these things until later. People came out. Sara was the only one who stuck up for me. Sara helped me when I felt suicidal at school because of this. All the lovely stories that we heard from everyone. She adored her little brother. She was his mum, including me, from the day he was born. She was nearly 5 when he was born. She was really close to her older brother as well. And she was really energetic as well. Like she'd go flat out every day, and then pretty much every day of her life, she'd have a 20-minute sleep in the afternoon. She'd just stop and then she'd get going again. So she was one in a million. And then
do I see her behind you? Is that a picture of her up on your shelf?
Yes. Yeah, that was the day. Oh, yes. So the very one at the very back. Yeah. So before she died, the day she died, she blew me a kiss. She goes, Mum, can't wait to see you 27 sleeps to go meet you in Paris. So she was over there and she'd never been away from home that long. And she'd been gone for 3 months and 1 week. And we were meeting her on a family holiday in Paris at the Eiffel Tower. So we were counting down every day. I'd message Facebook, Instagram, whatever, a message. And we would count down the days until we were meeting up on our family holiday. And, she was having the time of her life. She really enjoyed London. She came out of her shell, and I'm quite a people person and, bit of a clown at times and love having fun. And Sara was always quite shy. But then in London, she just blossomed into this person. I thought, oh, well, I'd do that. And she sent me a video when she was at an Italian restaurant and the waiter picked her up and she did this whole dance in front of everyone and did sort of the splits move and which I can do. And I thought, oh my God, that's something I'd do. And she was living her best life and she was the happiest she'd ever been. She was really excited about, exploring her European roots to do this European trip after she'd finished. And then she was coming back for her best friend's 21st in Australia. And then she got offered to, help the au pair nannies, the father to be a PA and come back there. So I really feel like she'd do this and then she would end up settling in London or, she had a big, massive plan. And then, on the night of the attack, she was meant to be working and the parents were out and the grandma was looking after the kids and she'd never looked after both little boys together. And she said, look, Sara, it's Saturday night in London. You should go out, go and enjoy yourself. And she was in an au pair nanny group. And so at the last minute, she got the night off. So she went out with her friend Pre, and then she was meeting another friend. After that, the rugby was on and they were looking for a classy rooftop bar and they couldn't find it. Anyway, they ended up at the Grind and they thought that was a good place to have some meatballs and wine because it was very close to the rugby. So then her phone rang to say, I'll finish at the rugby, come and meet me. So unbeknown to Sara, she walked out into a terror attack and she was bending down helping someone else and she was stabbed to death from behind. And she was the youngest of 8. There was 48 people horrifically injured. And then I get this phone call from the au pair nanny mum to say that Sara hadn't come home from her night out. And Sara's just not like that. And I thought, oh, that's odd. Then one thing led to another. I was actually away at the time. My husband
Can I stop you just for 1 second? So when you got this call, you guys, at this point, you had no idea these attacks had happened, right?
So at the time, there were 2 previous attacks. There was the Manchester and the Westminster Bridge attack.
Aria Grande.
So within 3 months, there were 3 terror attacks in London. And, we live in Australia, which for us, we're very protected from those sorts of things. We don't have incidents like terror attacks and we don't have, mass killings or shootings, and none of that stuff really happens in Australia. So for us, it's something that happens on TV. It's not real to us.
No.
So when Sara went out for dinner and we didn't know that she was exactly at Borough Market, but we knew she was out for dinner and we would not normally talk to her until the next morning or nighttime, her time, but morning our time.
Because of the time difference.
And it's, for us, you would never think that something like that would happen just because of our environment in Australia. And when we got the call to say that Sara's a missing person because she hadn't returned to home from the night out, it raised concerns to us, but not the fact that she had been killed. It raised concerns that, where is she, what's she doing? But as a parent, you never think the worst. So you're always thinking that, positive things are going to work out. And then, it's just going to be a matter of time and then we'll be reunited with SARZ. But during that whole process, Sara was then listed as a missing person. Her DNA didn't match so that the coroner couldn't release her name to anyone. So we waited 3 days before we found out that it was Sara who had been in the attack and had been killed. So in that 3 days, we were pretty much locked in our home because we were surrounded by media. We had our Australian Federal Police with us most of the time. It was just a period of time that, 3 days seems such a huge amount of time, but for us, it was just this blank space that you just can't remember.
It was like being in a never-ending car accident. Yeah. Or you're just screaming and you're on fire and then you're freezing and in a state of absolute shock, sudden trauma for 3 days that never ended.
And you're in a shock for 3 days because you are vacillating between the most horrific thing you can imagine, which is the death of your daughter, to all the way to the other side, like she's in hiding somewhere and she's fine. Right?
There were so many case scenarios.
So I guess
it was insane.
At the time, there were victims who had been attacked who were in hospital. I think there was something like 50.
There was 20 unconscious. So we thought, she's one of these people unconscious. She doesn't have ID with her and they don't know who she is. So she's unconscious. So My mum was on a cruise in Germany. So she jumps off the cruise because she's a lot closer to go and hold Sara's hand until we get there. So there was all this stuff going on. And Mark was working away in Canberra. So, I said, oh, maybe you should come back the next day. And then we tried to get a hold of the Australian Embassy, and they put us through to some call line that wasn't working because it was a weekend. So there was no one available till the Monday morning. But I had like 300 calls a day, but everyone called but Sara. And I did a radio interview that I don't even remember doing. I don't have any recollection of doing it. I didn't sleep or eat for 3 days. It was
Julie's just answering her phone, just hoping it's going to be
I
Sara.
just wanted to, because I wanted to keep my phone on just in case she rang, because my biggest fear, she was kidnapped and she was a sex slave. That was my biggest fear, because there was all this stuff going on. Everyone was coming up with all these things. They're in hiding. There's this happening, there's that happening. And you don't know what's going on and you can't get her. So you just come to these horrible conclusions, and none of it was true.
And with the coroner, so they couldn't release Sara's identity because their law in the UK is that they must identify the person 100%. Sara's DNA didn't match through her, or her dental records didn't match.
Yeah, so we thought, yes, that's great.
She was holding her passport, her driver's license. She had a phone with her. She had a lot of information that would identify her, although her passport photo was a little bit different to,
she doesn't look anything like her.
Her driver's license was, looked like she did look 12. But it's just the law is that they couldn't release that information. How we did find out is that, we're in 3 days of not knowing. We finally got a call from the Metropolitan Police in the United Kingdom, and they said that you should travel. So we jumped on a flight, and so from Australia to the UK, you've got to do a stopover at somewhere. So we stopped over in Abu Dhabi. As we're coming into land, Julie's phone starts ringing, and we're 1,000 feet, so you can actually get phone service. And it's our eldest son, Scott, has contacted Jules via WhatsApp and says, Mum, the DNA
results prove Sara was dead. It was just the worst thing. And I honestly thought I was having a heart attack. I really thought I was. I couldn't breathe. And Mark was sitting behind us, and I jumped out of my seat. They moved him to sit with me, and I thought, it just can't be. This can't be true. And then we got told, we were meant to be told by the pilot or something, and then we got this phone call once we touched down, and we went to a lounge and we were told that, yes. So we were the last ones to find out in the world that Sara died, because Malcolm Turnbull, our Prime Minister at the time, wanted to get it on the 6 o'clock news. So, yeah, it was a really bad way to find out.
These conversations are always super emotional. I'm surprised they told your son.
And
that's another story.
How that worked is that if they tell one of the biological parents, then they feel like they're okay.
Yeah.
So Sara's father, Andre, was told, who then told Scott. So that's how that worked. And
but Sara's father was never active in her entire life. He never paid maintenance. He never did anything. But they thought, oh, well, he'll do. It wasn't even...
And the fact is that it was, we were travelling under the direction of our Australian Federal Police. DFAT, our government agency, knew who we are, what we're doing, why we're going. The agencies all knew that Sara was in the morgue. They couldn't tell us until it was 100% clear.
Yeah.
That information was withheld from us because of red tape.
So they knew when you were flying, they already knew.
They knew. Everyone knew instantly.
Right, immediately after the attack, they knew. The 3 days, they withheld the information because of red tape.
But how could the DNA, I'm sorry, I need to back up because I know listeners are going to be wondering what I'm wondering. How could the DNA not match originally? Do they know why? Like, that is also odd.
The teeth.
Yeah, so her dental records didn't match the
up.
first time. They did the second time. To confirm her DNA, they went to her apartment and gained a hair sample and matched the 2 hair samples. And that's how they finalised it. But this is happening over the weekend. Coroners dealing with an attack. They have put it on the waiting list, so to speak. And it took time, and it took 3 days.
Yeah. But also Mark rang all the hospitals. There were 7 hospitals that went out like a spider. That received patients. So Mark's ringing all the hospitals in London to find her, but she wasn't admitted as a patient because she was in the morgue. So she never came up. So there was 20, people unconscious. There was 48 people injured, but she was in the morgue, not...
So wait,
not
there were
in life.
48, eight died, correct?
Yes.
No.
Eight,
So
48.
8 died and there were injured.
48 injured and 20 unconscious out of those 48. So yeah.
and 9 who actually died. And did the rest of the
He was the youngest of 8. Yeah.
of 8? Okay. And then the rest of them survived.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so you're telling me you waited 3 days. Finally, they tell you that you need to get on a plane and you're on this flight and you learn that your daughter has died from your son.
Yep. Well, our youngest son was big chaos because Scott said, no, I'm not going to London because I have such great memories living over there and traveling. So at the end, he decided he didn't want to go. And then we thought we have to take Harrison because he's only 16. He needs us to look after him. And so in the end, the 3 of us flew.
But we're flying with hope in our heart that we're going to go to London. We're going to find Sara and she's going to come home with us.
Mum's there. She's looking after her because she's unconscious and we'll bring her home. They said, just don't take hand luggage. So we went the way on the plane.
No, we only took hand luggage because we're going overnight to get her and
bring her home. Yeah, that's right. And we didn't go through customs or anything. We went the secret way to the airport. We were followed to the airport with all the media. And then we went the secret way to the airport, first on the plane, the way the Queen goes, so that we could dodge everyone because it was world news at the time. It was horrific. Yeah.
So what happened? Tell us what happened. You get over there and you deal with the nightmare.
Once we learn the news landing into Abu Dhabi, we've now got another 8-hour flight from Abu Dhabi to the UK.
London. Yeah.
So we've got 8 hours to process
10 hours,
this.
by the time we leave.
Then we're meted. So with terror attacks, there's the Five Eyes. So there's Australia, United Kingdom, Canada, America, and New Zealand considered the Five Eyes. And in cases of terrorism, they share information, they support, and they have a system called Family Liaison Officer. So anyone or any family involved in a terror attack gets supported by a member of the police. So our federal police, our Australian Federal Police, supported us here in Australia to get us on the flights, to assist us, to then be greeted by the Metropolitan Police in the United Kingdom. So once we land there, we're greeted by Jim Galvin, who was representing the Metropolitan Police, and he and another officer are at our, I guess, second call for all the time that we're in London. So all the things that we're dealing with, and we're super well supported in the fact of, if Sara had died in a car accident, you kind of learn the news in the hospital and then, okay, make your way home. Whereas being in this, I guess, the victims of terror support network through the Family Liaison is that we're guided every step of the way. So we're taken to the morgue to...
Not yet, 4 days later.
Yeah, but the family support officers are all about showing you through all those steps and then to make the repatriation of the body back home. All that network of police are there to support families suffering attack of a terrorism.
It's very different to the terrorist attack because when you lose your child in a terrorist attack in London from Australia, it's not a normal death by any means. So we're picked up, we were escorted and guided because the media was huge. The whole Borough Markets where the attack happened was all a crime scene. So it was all cut off. So we went through the whole Borough Markets crime scene. And we saw, always remember the paella still in the bowl, the chairs turned over, the blood, all the red tape stuff. We went through the whole place, which was really confronting. Then we had to go to Scotland Yard and then we had to be escorted for the start of the inquest. We met royals, we had church services, there was hundreds of meters of flowers for all the victims and all the letters of hope. All out everywhere. There was media everywhere. So it's not like, when your grandma dies and you just see them in the hospital and say goodbye or whatever. It's really traumatic. And because we live in Brisbane, Australia, I don't know another family that's lost a child in a terrorist attack in London. We don't have any terrorist attack. It's a lonely space. No one in Brisbane, Australia that I'm aware of has ever died in a terrorist attack. There's us.
Let's just say that the majority of us do not. I mean, of course, when the Twin Towers went down, right? Like somebody knew somebody who died in the towers. But for the most part, we do not know people who have died in a terrorist attack. And I am sitting here thinking to myself how traumatic it was when my brother died, being over in Hong Kong and what that felt like. And so I'm imagining it was 5 days before I got on a flight, so I could kick and scream and be in shock and do all the things. And I'm imagining you on this flight, you learn the most horrific news that you could possibly learn. You've got another 8-hour flight. Now you're swarmed by media and all of this stuff. To say it's surreal is not the right word, but how do you even survive that? And it takes you 4 days before you can see your daughter's body, right?
Yeah.
So
you still have hope until you see her body and you know it's actually her. Yeah, I still had 1% of hope that maybe they've got it wrong. Yeah, and we had to wait 4 days to make her body okay well enough for us to see her. Yeah.
And it is. I mean, we've got the 8-hour flight once you learn the news, but you're in shock. You know, it's an immediate shock that you cannot fathom how you process that. And you always sit there with that piece of hope. Even, you know, when we saw Sarah's body, you still didn't believe it.
Oh, you did. Once I saw all her freckles and fingers and toes and her wounds and her earrings and yeah, once we finally did say goodbye to her, Mark and I held her hand and then she held on back and she was freezing cold because she was in the morgue, but her hand was warm. And from that day, her spirit came with us and she's been with us and every day. And that night after we saw her on my phone at 11:11 at night, her name come up on the bottom of my phone. And then all of a sudden, I've never been a spiritual person in any way. And now I'm a really spiritual person. And I have so many signs from the unseen world from her. People feel her. She does things and guides me. Like I feel like I'm the conduit between heaven and earth to guide with our, you know, SARZ Sanctuary, our SARZ Spirit Foundation, our charity in honor of her. And I go with that now. And I mean, before I had no reason to be spiritual, but now I'm really spiritual.
Talk to us about the journey, right? So there's the two of you, as you know, and I want to get into this a little bit because this is actually the first time I get to have a mom and a dad on this podcast at the same time. So that's very special to me because I know that men and women grieve very differently. And then you also have your sons. So can you talk to us of how you navigated this grief journey as a family? And I want to talk about the foundations to what you have done as a result to really keep Sara's spirit so alive and also to help others, right? Because she continues to help in ways that she couldn't when she was here. But I really would love it if the two of you could talk about the grief journey.
Yeah. Well, we've had different pathways. I mean, when we came back, I was a personal trainer. I used to do 40 PTs a week. And we had this family holiday booked and we had 1,000 people at her funeral and it was very public. And then I got back to work as fast as I could because I couldn't go there. I kept as busy as I possibly could because to go to that dark space was too dark and I couldn't deal with it. So I went and worked as much as I could, did as many things as I could for about a year. And then one day, one of my clients, I'll never forget, she came in crying because her cat was sick. I thought, oh my God, I can't do this crappy, stupid, pathetic job any longer. It's not meaningful enough for me. Like you want to lose weight or get fit, go for a run, have a salad, you know, whatever. Do it yourself. I just thought, I'm done. So I quit. I thought, this is just not meaningful enough for me. So I couldn't do it anymore. And then I started dealing with my grief and I could never go in Sara's room. Everything stayed exactly the same, whereas Mark's journey was completely different.
Yeah, so for me, straight after Sara's funeral is that, you know, I didn't have any purpose in life at all. I didn't understand that situation. And probably the first 3 months or so, I just couldn't get out of bed. You know, I would sleep 16, 18 hours a day. Jules was off working and working really hard, looking at me going, you know, what the hell is going on here? So it, for me, was really, really tough, just trying to make sense of that. And I guess that's where both Jules and I, even in that 12 days that we were in London, we both, through that support network of the family liaison system, is that we identified that we needed to help other people. So even though I couldn't get out of bed and I had no real drive, is that we separately had our ideas, but together had formulated what we wanted to do to support others. And so we created a not-for-profit organisation to then, what we wanted to do is to bring people together and show them, and I guess have a tasting plate of different healing modalities. So have a 5-day live-in retreat where people could come along and learn different ways of healing through grief. We created the foundation and we were working down that pathway for a good 18 months. And the impact of COVID changed the fact that you couldn't have people together. In Australia, our borders closed, so we couldn't even travel, across borders. There was all these impacts to say that that shouldn't happen. So in that COVID time is that we identified that the live-in retreat potentially could, help 20 people a week, although you couldn't have people together at that time. So we've created a digital platform where we can connect people seeking help through grief with the best of practice practitioners anywhere in the world. So the amount of people that we can help is unlimited. It's a global system where we can bring people together. So building a community of liked experienced people. And as we discussed earlier before we started this, is that Julie and I don't understand suicide. We don't understand sibling loss. What we know is that we know the loss of a child, and we know the loss of a child in a terror attack. So we want to bring together community leaders in all the different spaces. So community leader who knows suicide or has experienced that personally, so that they can speak from the heart. We want to create all these different groups. We found that the first responders in the attack, the particular 2 police officers who tried to resuscitate Sara, even though that she died immediately from her stab wounds, they tried for 10 minutes during an attack to resuscitate her, because that's what their job asks them to do.
But don't forget, in London, they don't have guns. Only 8 different sections. There's 42 different sections. Only 8 carry guns in London. They carry batons. And so they're unsafe themselves. They're in the dark. They don't know there was 56 shot fired. They don't know if it's a terrorist attack or the police firing. So they're at risk themselves in the dark, and they're not armed. And so, the impacts of that, it's not like, and then you go across the border to France and they've got machine guns and they shoot and ask questions later. So it's very different way of life.
Yeah, so for us, the first responders, and we identified that they did that. They were trying to resuscitate Sara. They went through this whole terror attack without any consideration for their own lives. Then they go home to their own families, and how do they navigate that? And then they're expected to come back to work tomorrow and do it all again.
Yeah.
And so we really identified that helping people through traumatic grief, loss, PTSD, and then also secondary trauma, because
vicarious trauma. Yes.
Yeah.
Before you leap ahead, though, I want to slow us down, because going back, what you 2 said was really important, I think, for us to slow down the story around how you did the early grief so differently. So Julie, you couldn't deal. You were in shock. You absolutely 100% could not dive into that reality. It took a year for you to even come to terms with your daughter being gone, right? Mark, you on the other hand, you dove deep into what I consider that early deep grief, which is debilitating. Can't get out of bed. How did the 2 of you navigate that together, doing it so very differently? Like the messy stuff where, Julie, you might be like, Jesus, Mark, get the hell out of bed. And you're probably like, I don't even know how you can go to work because your daughter died. And then you got the boys, right? Like, what are they doing? You've got a 16-year-old and a 23-year-old. Can you guys talk to us? This is the hard stuff I know to talk about, but this is the stuff where people don't know if they're going to survive it. They just don't know if they're going to survive it. And so, and I love what you said, Julie. Sorry, it's funny. Go eat a salad if you want to lose weight. I left my job too after my brother died. I'd been with this company for 14 years and I'm like, I'm all done. And it wasn't quite a year, but it was just funny when you said that, because when you finally let yourself see the reality, you're like, wow, really, your cat? I mean, I'm still at the point where I can't have conversations about what I think are really stupid things, because once
I can't sweat the small stuff anymore.
I can't either.
I just don't care.
So how did the two of you navigate that? I mean, I think it's a miracle you're still together, quite frankly, because many couples would never have made it through what you
She's
have.
pretty lucky, isn't she?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, 80% of parents split up after loss of child.
That's right.
Just the horrible statistics. But Mark and I are like yin and yang always, and we've always been super, super close. And Mark's always been my best friend. So we had an incredible bond to begin with. And Mark and I are very different. And I always do like stupid things and do things not conventionally. And Mark's really grounded and stable and normal. And together we really, really complement each other in the funniest ways, don't we?
Yeah.
And we love having fun together as well.
With us is that we both identified early that we're on the same journey. You know, we both have the same experience,
Yes.
but our pathways to healing are totally different.
Yes.
And, you know, we are different people, and yeah, Julie says she's out there. So I guess where I see that other couples don't get through this is potentially, firstly, the foundation is not there. But secondly, with the journey process is that there's a bit of resentment. Like if I was to see Julie, you know, having a laugh, and I was in that space to think, well, how can you do that when I can't do that? So it's really identifying that you are on your own journey, that you're on your own pathway. Support to say, well, whatever you're doing, and you know, my support was, you know, I didn't think that Jules going back to work immediately was a great thing, but that was her choice, so go and do it. And then conversely, her seeing me lying in bed all day, I'm sure she wasn't keen on that.
Whatever.
But but also in where we're at is that we're parents who have lost a child. We don't understand sibling grief. We've got no idea how our two sons, and quite young ages too, who have lost their sister, how they're going to navigate it and what their steps are, and how, as parents, how do we support
I felt I
them?
had to be strong and not show my emotion for them, which looking back at it now, I think that's not the right thing to do. But that's what I thought at the time. And at the time, you just got to get through each day. It's like baby steps. You know,
What were
baby steps each day.
What were the boys doing though?
They were like Mark. They were like,
yeah.
Initially, they slept a lot. It was school holidays for Harrison.
Yeah, so they were very, I guess, solemn, and there was no drive for. They were just going through the motions. You know,
they didn't want to go out.
Harrison was at school. Scott was working.
He was working.
Yeah, and they would just purely go through the motions.
Yeah.
And as a child, you can see the grief that the parent's going through, so you don't want to burden the parent with your grief. So they were really holding all that in.
Yeah, Scott was very angry initially because of the terrorist attack, you know, revengeful, angry when it all happened, which most men in our country and our place wanted to, you know, hated every Muslim and all that sort of stuff. Whereas I couldn't do that, and neither could Mark, because unconditional love will always win over hate. I would not give them the pleasure. I don't, to this day, know the three people's names, and they're all instantly shot. They're all killed. The 56 bullets went into every perpetrator, and they're dead. I don't know their names, and I don't know their family, don't know anything about them, and I will not give them any energy, because that's just how it is, and I will not let them win. And by hating them creates more hate, which creates more wars, which creates more terrorist attacks. And I thought, no, I'm not doing that. So I never gave them 1% of my energy to this day, and I never will.
Which that in and of itself is incredible, because, you know, I remember this one young woman I interviewed, her brother was stabbed to death in a bar, and he was standing up for a group of women. And she said that she had been so angry and it was destroying her anger toward the perpetrators. And she said she was in the shower one day and she had this overwhelming feeling, and she heard her brother say, don't let them take anything more from you. And she said that was the day that she understood that the anger toward them was killing her, not them.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what they want. I'm never going to do that. And so that's why we built SARZ Sanctuary. We're not for profit in the UK as well. And the lovely thing about the UK, when it all happened, they totally get terrorist attacks and IRA attacks. And we had so much love and support from the people in the UK, because so many people over there been a part or know someone or experience an attack, because it happens all the time because of the population.
Did the two of you ever need to get any help, or did you go to a grief group, or?
Yeah, I guess so. Initially, we did a couple of counselling sessions. We did one as a family, then we were offered counselling sessions individually. Jules and I were very proactive in finding healing modalities, and that's really where we went outside counselling, and we were looking for different things. And what, again, in our journey of healing, is what works for me doesn't necessarily work for Jules. And so we've done all sorts of things.
We've done everything.
Equine healing, Reiki, kinesiologists, energy healing. Jules put me into this workshop. I didn't know that she was organising this, but, I'll go along. And so ended up doing 8 hours of chakra dance.
You guys are so wonderful. Listen.
It wasn't 8 hours of chakra dance. It was an 8-hour workshop. But he did do chakra dance blindfolded with his cute little, frilly blindfolded on. So and he had to dance like no one's watching. And I did actually take a photo of him doing it, but he didn't know that.
So that big ring of trust where you put your blindfold on and you can be safe and secure. And my wife's bloody filming it.
Yeah. Well, you didn't know at the time.
But for me and for blokes, blokes don't talk about grief. They push it down. You're told to forget about it. You go to the pub to then forget about it even more and not talk about it there. It's, for me, the chakra dance, which I would have never have done that in my wildest dreams, was probably one of the most enlightening things I have done and one of the most healing things I have done. Mm-hmm. So it's...
Why? What was it about it that was healing?
So during that process, towards the end of that workshop, is that you're now dancing to your third eye. You're in a space of, I guess, inner feeling. And for me, my biggest fear is that Sara died at the age of 21, that I would never know what she looks like at the age of 30 or 40, or I would never see her grow or change and be the person that she was going to grow into. And during that session is that I was dancing with Sara. I could feel her, I could smell her, and I could see her at the age of 25. I could see her at her age at the time. And for me, that was so incredible. And I guess, Julie speaks that she's quite spiritual and connected with Sara. I just haven't connected as much as Jules has, but I'm very open to learn more about it. Yeah. And that session was just incredible.
That's amazing. What I love is when you said we've tried everything, because I did everything too. And I think that what I love about talking about these different things, it's that permission, right? It's when we're trying to do work and move deep pain. I had this medium on here. You guys might enjoy that conversation with Deborah Hamlin. And the way that she talked about it was, that when somebody dies, the grief process, I think, I'm going to botch the way she said it, but what resonates with me is that it awakens almost the dead parts of us, the stuff that comes up that can't be ignored. The fear, the guilt, the anger, the shame, so many things happen in deep grief that is an invitation to expand in a way that we can't quite imagine until you're in that space, because the darkness is so dark and it's such a terrifying space to be in. And we can only have those awakenings if we're open to the experiences, right? Because people can get very stuck in different parts of grief. And so I want to ask you, because the other big piece that happens are friendships and other family members, because in that grief, we can really start clipping people out of our life. We meet new people, doors open, doors close. What was the experience like? Because you said over 1,000 people came to your daughter's memorial or funeral.
Yeah, culturally, we find that people give you about 18 months to get over it.
Yeah.
And it's, we kind of see that in all different countries around the world, is that people who are not in grief or haven't grieved before don't understand that grief never leaves. It's with you for the rest of your life. There's an expectation that time heals. There's an expectation that you'll get over it. So we definitely had people that are you still talking about this? It's been 12 months. With our foundation, and it's named in honour of Sara, we get to talk about Sara every day, and we get to share her name with complete strangers every day. So for us, we've given ourselves permission to talk about her, but other people who have lost someone close to them, pretty much by society told to like shut that conversation down and stop talking about it. And it's a sense that it's uncomfortable for the other person. Well, bugger the other person. It's your person to remember. And if you want to talk about someone that you've lost, they're there to be talked about.
The best way to describe it is like my grief is as personal to me as my fingerprint. That's how it is. That's how you can describe it for people to understand.
Yes. And absolutely 100%. And what I've always said is there are no clocks, there are no calendars. It looks so different for everyone. And all of the things that we think about, you don't have to do it alone. There's no shame in reaching out. Know when it's time to get help, right? Because as I said, deep grief can be so debilitating that 3 months where you can't get out of bed can turn into a year.
I totally agree. It does also make you more resilient in a way if you can use it in a positive way, whereas a lot of people get stuck in the victim, poor me, and they can't get out of that. But just being vulnerable and sharing my story and my journey and my spirituality and all those things, and I get huge engagement on that, allows others to share their story and to be able to talk about that. And, there's 117 million people around the world that suffer from PTSD. So you aren't alone, but you have to share the resources and build the communities and to normalize the trauma of grief and loss.
And what you just said, it's talking about it. You don't move on, you move forward, right? With the spirit. Yes. And you're open to the signs. I'm open to the signs. Not everybody believes in the signs.
I've done kinesiology and Reiki and mindfulness, and I've cleared my chakras, and I want to receive, because if I was closed off, I wouldn't have any connection. I have nothing. And to have nothing is so much worse than to have something.
And so tell us, where are your sons now? Did your sons go to therapy? Are your sons a part of the foundation? Are they able to talk about it? Like, tell me how they've done throughout this process.
So I guess initially they both were very closed in conversation, and they just really wanted to, ignore their grief, dealt with it very personally. It's almost 5 years now. And during that process, our youngest son has got a girlfriend. That's helped him navigate through that connection of, losing his sister. They both have, I guess, moved through life in different jobs, vocations and study. And, I guess Harrison, who was young, living with us, has moved out. So they're moving through life. But I think the big part of what we do daily in SARZ Sanctuary is that we connect people through conversation, and we talk about Sara each and every day. So at home and with our boys, it's a normal conversation to have Sara included in it. Yeah. And, she's always with us. She's, in a sense, she's alive. We just don't get to see her. And I think that's definitely helped them. And they're actually showing more interest in what we do as in our foundation.
They're not embarrassed. They initially, especially Harrison, was embarrassed by what we were doing. And now he's really on board with it, and he's interested in the digital platform. And Scott's always been fine with it. We've done fundraisers or events, and he's kind of a bit more mature. He was angry to begin with, but now he's fine. But we always talk about it. Like if we go for dinner as a family and we'll have an extra seat at the table, but we haven't ordered an extra seat at the table. There's always an extra seat at the table. Sara always organises that. So we always include her in stuff and talk about it. We just had Mother's Day, so we had all the old photos out and laughing and talking about our family holidays or things Sara did. Like we talk about her all the time normally and embrace that. So I think they've come a long way in a good way. We did have one family counselling session, but none of them wanted to go back. And I did go to the doctors, and they wanted to put me on antidepressants, and I didn't want to do that because I need to feel. I don't want to be numb. I don't want to suppress it because the body keeps a score. And I'm always been a holistic, as a personal trainer into health and nutrition. And I just never felt right about going down that pathway. I mean, it's a personal journey. Everyone's different. But for me, that wasn't an option.
I think that what you're saying is so critical right now, because when someone in our life dies that we love, we're sad. And that sadness over time isn't as acute as when somebody first dies. It's always with us. And I love the way one of my guests talked about after losing her son, that you grow your life around the grief. And I always think about the hole that the person we lost, that their presence that's always with us, that something beautiful blooms in that space. And I love what you just said about not wanting to go on medication. If people need to go on medication, go on medication. But I felt the same way. It's like, why can't we just be sad and move through our sadness? Because if we allow ourselves, and this is the deep grief work, if we do the work and we allow ourselves to go to those dark places and move that pain, we will feel joy again. Our life will look different. It never looks the same, but it can be even more beautiful and more meaningful. And I think you've said so many things that are so powerful. I'm going to have to go back and listen to this interview, but I love that you have a space for her. Our loved ones aren't on the physical plane, but they are with us spiritually. Their spirit lives on. It never dies. We don't ever have to stop thinking about them or talking about them and acknowledging their presence. They are always with us. And I know that not everybody believes that.
It's like those Japanese bowls with the gold. So they put the Japanese bowls together with the beautiful gold with all the cracks through them. So you're actually stronger. But that's how you're healing. But I do think as a mum, when you lose a child, a part of you dies with your child and you do become a new, different version of yourself.
Yes.
And that's where you lose the friendships because you're not the person you used to be and you can never be that person. You're now a new, different version of yourself. And that's where friends can drop off along the way and think, life changes.
Yeah.
And definitely we think that grief or losing someone that's so close to you is just like a massive hole in your heart, but it's really about how you heal around that hole. The hole's never going to get fixed. It's always going to be there. You're always going to carry that grief for the rest of your life, but it's how you then heal around
the
that
hole. Yeah.
And then, how you do go and find joy again. If people see Jules and I laughing, are we supposed to be sad for the rest of our lives? We never forget Sara. She's always a big part of what we do. But we also are proactive about trying to find, a great purpose in what we do.
And peace in your heart. You have to find peace. And then when you find peace, you can find joy.
And I love that. Yes. And that your daughter and my brother and all the loved ones. I mean, I'll often see my brother. My brother was so beautiful and he had these deep, deep dimples and these little sparkle in his eye. And sometimes when something funny happens, I see him. I can almost hear him laughing. I talk to him every single day, and my mom passed 2 years ago. And so I just always imagine them together. And so they're just with me all the time. I don't go to my mother's grave even. My dad goes and plants flowers, but I'm like, it doesn't occur to me to go sit by the grave because I just always feel like he's
around. He's around.
Yes. So my last question that I always ask is, what does self-love look like now? And I would like each one of you to answer that separately.
Self-love for me is keeping my bucket full because I work and connect with everyone who's lost a child or someone close to them. So I'm always giving. So I have to make sure I walk my dog every day. I do 11 minutes of earthing to the universe. So I put my feet on the grass and connect, or I go to the beach. I do some sort of nature, something each day. And I do my yoga, nidra, 20-minute meditation. And every night I light my candle. We personally make our own soy organic SARZ Sanctuary candles, and the profits from the candles is building our digital platform. They're online, they're on our shop. And I personally, every night, I put on my candle and I do my candle ritual in honor of Sara to reflect and remember.
So for me, self-love, and I really do fall in that category of what blokes really don't consider themselves and they just get on with it. But I have only just recently reflected that we are now going into the anniversary of Sara's death is in the 3rd of June this year, and it's 5 years. And for me, I've been sitting back looking at myself going, well, what the hell have I done in the last 4.5 years? And I really haven't cared for myself, physically. I guess mentally I have, but not physically. So, it was a about a month ago that I actually started and considering my own health, and I've changed my diet, and I'm actually looking after my fitness regime, which having a personal trainer as a wife is just ridiculous. But so, for me, it's now actually caring for myself, and I really consider that I need to start doing that because, I need to do that for myself, then I can help others.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you both for that. I feel like this could have been like a 3-part series. And I feel like it is such a gift that the two of you, as I said earlier, are on here together.
This is the healing range of body, mind, spirit, soul. But this is the soul candle, which is unconditional love, which is rose geranium. And it's also organic. But I need to send you one so that you know what they're like.
Okay, so tell us right now your platforms. We're going to have everything in the show notes. So I want to know your digital platform, your website, your Instagram channel. Give it to me all.
Okay, so we founded, both Jules and I founded SARZ Sanctuary, so SARZ Sanctuary.com. And SARZ Sanctuary is building a digital platform to connect people who are seeking help from traumatic grief, loss, PTSD, and secondary trauma. And we're connecting the best of practice practitioners anywhere in the world to these people. So it's a platform where you can go and consider the elements mind, body, spirit, soul, because as we know, trauma is held in our body. We need to then consider how that is manipulated through spirit, soul, and the mind as well. So it's really bringing together all those practitioners in a safe place, so a community of people who are liked experienced. And liked experience is that you may have suffered grief, loss, or be in that space of PTSD, and then you can share with other people who get it. It's no use going to a psychologist who is only textbook ready, who doesn't understand where you are and what you're doing. So it's bringing together a community of people who understand and supporting the communities. We have our not-for-profit space, which is SARZ Spirit Foundation. So sarzspiritfoundation.org. And it's the voice to change conversation around grief. It's helping people to have that healthy and positive conversation, to remember our lost loved ones, to make that open conversation and have grief as not something that's, a taboo subject. Actually, it's something that we can talk about and communicate with and embrace it. We're all spirits living in human bodies.
Yes.
Just because those spirits have left, they're still there. We're still connected. And we feel Sara every day. And, my father passed 10 years before Sara. He's a big part of what I do as well, and everyone has a spirit guiding them. They have someone they're connecting with, just need to be open to it.
Thank you so very much. I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. Please check the show notes so that you can connect with Julie and Mark and the digital platform that they're creating. And thank you both. And thank you, Sara, because I know that you are here with us tonight during this interview. And I cannot wait to get involved with all that you guys are doing. So thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Leap, please subscribe, share it with others, or leave a rating and review so others can benefit from this content. Be sure to check out the show notes for resources related to this episode. And to catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at susan.casey. If you have a transformational story to share on grief and loss, please email me at leapwithsusan@gmail.com. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.